All right, so welcome everyone to the May 2025 Main Street, Rhode Island virtual roundtable, social connection on Main Street. Uh, welcome. I want to make sure everyone knows we are recording our session today. Um, as you may have seen in my email yesterday, would love to have you all to have your cameras on if possible especially during the discussion portion of the day. Most of the session today will be discussion. Um, and what I'm going to ask all of you to do is please introduce yourself in the chat. As we have always made great use of the chat feature. Please start out by just introducing yourself. If you're affiliated with a Main Street or an organization of any kind, you can note that. And what we'll do instead of taking the time to each introduce ourselves is we'll have my colleague Evelyn track everyone and then go and introduce you to the group just one at a time quickly so that we can jump right into the discussion. And I'll have her do that later. So you've got a few minutes to do that. But yes, please make use of the chat also for putting in all of your questions as they occur to you so we don't lose track of them. But that's great. Going to All right, someone know, make sure that we thank our generous sponsors for today, which include Rhode Island Commerce and the Rhode Island Department of Health through a grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Though they do not endorse the content of this program, they've provided generous support. And also Rhode Island Energy, who's really been a transformational founding sponsor of our entire Main Street initiative. We're so grateful to them for being such great community partners. Um, if anyone is new to the idea of Main Street in Main Street, Rhode Island, we are connecting with a national movement led by an organization called Main Street America, which has existed since 1980, and they are proponents of what is known as the 4 points Main Street approach, which really looks at all aspects of place that make a traditional commercial district, otherwise, shorthand Main Street district, which could be, a village center, it could be a downtown, could be a neighborhood shopping area. Any of those places, what makes those places successful? And they've identified these 4 areas of work that are all really required to make that place really thrive. It's a time-tested approach. And Grow Smart Rhode Island is trying to become the state entity that partners with Main Street America to lead the implementation of this approach in all of our Main Street districts. Um, so today's topic, as I mentioned, is social connection on Main Street. We always think about small business and economic development as being primary drivers of Main Street work, but there's really this whole other side of it, which is about the community and Main Streets is of ways to connect with each other, which is not really happening so much these days. So excited to have with us today as our featured guest, Bill Bartholomew. He was the keynote speaker at the recent Grow Smart Rhode Island Awards event on May 8th, and provided a keynote address that really did look at place and social connection. And a lot of the reasons why perhaps those things weren't happening as much as we'd like, but the opportunity that Rhode Island has uniquely to advance that. So you probably know Bill. He is best known for founding Rhode Island Podcast.com, ripodcast.com, which is the platform for his podcast Bartholomew Town. It's widely considered to be Southern New England's leading news, politics, and culture podcast. It recently published his 850th episode and has explored topics of interest to Grow Smart Rhode Island that include housing, walkability in downtown Providence, the closure of multiple music venues, and many other topics that are related. You might also recognize his voice from WPRO, which News Talk 99.7, where he is a producer, assistant program manager, and on-air host. also a recurring panelist on Rhode Island PBS's A Lively Experiment, and a new venture, which maybe he'll discuss with PBS called Truly Rhody. And and if all of that is not enough, he is also an accomplished musician. So excited that he was able to provide such an inspiring keynote the other day, and we're so excited that he's here today to continue that conversation with us, focused on Main Street specifically. So I'm going to turn this over to Bill to give us kind of an overview and get us back in mode of thinking about all of this. And then we'll transition to the discussion. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, turn it up and turn it over to Bill. So thanks so much, Bill.
Jillian, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for being here today and for all of you who are at the keynote and are obviously the Smart Growth Awards. That was a really special night, an inspiring night that was, at the end of the day, exactly what I think the solution looks like to bringing us closer together and revitalizing that Main Street mentality, specifically here in Rhode Island, which, hey, we've got a unique opportunity to do some really special stuff here, not only on a regional basis, because we're always comparing ourselves with Massachusetts, not only on a national basis, but on a global basis. So the executive summary of the keynote was actually kind of startling, because we went into this idea of disconnection in whatever you want to call it, the modern era, the digital era. And we kind of all know at some level that digital realms have, if not replaced, have certainly altered our in-person experiences. And we knew that there was something wrong about what was happening. You could just feel it. But as I started to really research this and really take a look at some of the startling statistics around social disconnection, it became clear that the problem was actually pretty well summarized in what is a kind of buzzy term, but not a mainstream term yet, social atomization, which is when individuals start to act like their own atoms rather than as part of a collective. So, look, there's a real danger to this. There's significant consequences to social atomization, which range from loneliness and mental health issues. Loneliness, for example, this statistic is crazy. 15 cigarettes a day are as dangerous as a lifetime in loneliness. So there are actually physical, cardiovascular, documented, academically researched proofs that loneliness is bad for our health. There are many others as well that we talked about, and those that we didn't talk about. If you saw the cutting room floor for this keynote, it's sad. I mean, the amount of research that's gone into this. Of course, driving this more than anything, we found, not surprisingly, perhaps, malicious algorithms. And social media companies, look, they're not in business to bring us closer together, to make us love each other more or anything like that. They're in business to make money. And the clear reality, just like the local news, you turn on the talk radio, especially in the mornings here, and you watch the 6 o'clock news. They come on, they're going to tell you how dangerous Providence is. Better stay home, better not go to Providence, because somebody's going to mug you or whatever if you go to a restaurant downtown. That same formula, which has worked well to sort of build the entertainment news stuff, the 6 o'clock news, the talk radio, that kind of stuff, is what social media companies use to divide us. And in the process, they're literally making money by keeping us on these platforms for as long as possible. And they keep us on the platforms as long as possible by instilling hate and fear. So there's this vicious cycle happening. We're all in one way or another involved in this, even if you're not using social media in any way, shape, or form, your world, there's hardly a chance that nobody in your world is regularly on social media, and perhaps even replacing their in-person connections with social media. So that's the reality. It's led to political fragmentation. There was a crazy statistic that we found where 40% of Biden and Trump voters felt that it was appropriate to use violence to stop their opponents agenda from being fulfilled. And we see that play out all over the place. Things like Brexit and more so January 6th. But even the news today, the horrible news out of Washington, is an example of where we've entered into this place of madness, the likes of which maybe we've never seen before. And so, what does that mean? Well, we're in this socially atomized environment with no real way out. Tech companies are only getting more and more sophisticated using AI and soon AGI, artificial general intelligence, and that's going to have real consequences. So how do we fix it? Main Street, right there. Main Street is how we bring ourselves back together, right? And Main Street can be, of course, literally Broadway, Newport, Market in Warren, whatever the case may be, or it can be more of a mindset of third places. Third places are places that are other than, or places you feel a sense of belonging other than your home or hopefully your work. And third places, whether it be a venue or a park or a Dell's lemonade truck, whatever, they're the generative space that creates social engagement. You can build them, but you have to have an organic process to get people to want to explore them. That's what's happened in Warren, as Warren has been revitalized with investments like Hope in Maine, all of the restaurants, the music venues, the collaborative, the various events like the Warren Folks Fest, the Warren Walkabouts, on and on. These are events that people want to be at. You feel like, man, I'm missing out. And so that creates a sense of belonging. It has created a sense of belonging, and people talk about this all year. And now Warren, 20 years after manufacturing pulled out, and it was kind of a left behind population decline environment. Now, through a Main Street initiative, a holistic Main Street initiative, you're seeing people want to be in Warren. They want to live there. They want to raise their kids there. They want to go hang out there. They want to explore there. And you start to feel a sense of not only a neighborhood, but neighbors who actually know each other and can build traditions and anticipate what may be a better future on that hyper local level. So that's just one example. They're all over our state. Main Street in Wakefield, another great example. Some of the programming that happens there. Westerly, the United Theater, the area around Wilcox Park. Providence, the pedestrian bridge, and the 195 land. Obviously, there are many others, but in extreme executive summary, to combat social atomization, it became clear that we have to be in each other's company. And not only are there physical benefits to that from the standpoint of physical and mental health, but there are also societal needs that are simply not being met. We're getting lonelier and lonelier, and we're getting duped into thinking that we're connected because of Instagram, when in reality, that's an artificial, almost a digital clone of sorts. So raising up Main Street and associating as much positive energy as we can, and getting people like all of you, getting people at the municipal level in government, getting people at the state level and the federal level all on board with this and working together to do their part to raise up Main Streets. And then ultimately, rather than having little clusters of Main Streets all over Rhode Island, you start to have this harmonious synergy where, believe it or not, somebody from Wakefield might actually travel to Westerly and go check out what's happening there. It might require a teleportation device because it is Rhode Island, but they'll do it. And suddenly the whole state, little communities have their own identities, and a shared experience happens, and that will dominate people's consciousness. And Instagram can go back and Facebook can go back to what it should be, which is just a way to communicate with people that you otherwise don't see normally and to have some fun and watch a video of somebody, I don't know, spraying another person with a hose at Walmart in the garden section. That's what it should be for, not a replacement connection. So that's a very clunky executive summary of what we talked about the other night, but in sum, that's the deal.
Awesome. And I will mention that if you missed the keynote, I did share a video or a link to the video of the keynote in the email that I sent out yesterday, and it's on Grow Smart Rhode Island's YouTube channel. If you can go there to find it. Um, so always can go back and watch it. I think the fact that you're all here probably indicates you do agree that that social connection is an issue. But if you don't, you can also reference our former Surgeon General's report on what you referred to as the loneliness epidemic. Um, or some all the research that Bill referenced is I'm noticing it more and more. There's a foundation for social connection that's been established. I believe it's out of Atlanta, um, and then but national in scope, and we're there. I recommend that as a resource, and also really looking at so what are the ramifications beyond like your personal health that's impacted by loneliness? So, um, uh, I believe out of University of Chicago, a researcher called named Nick Epley, who was really looking at our mid-tier connections. So if our close family, like we're actually closer to than we have, traditionally been as Americans. And through social media, we're connected, better with those people on the edges of our networks. It's the ones in the middle that are really suffering. So these are like neighbors, the types of people, there's more acquaintances, but that is where you are most likely to interact with people who are different from you, or may hold a different opinion from you. And so the social atomization is impacting this political polarization, which I believe everyone might agree, no matter what your thoughts are, that that is a problem causing dysfunction in the government as far as bipartisan policymaking, and and how can place help us build back? How can we change our places so that we're more likely to maintain those connections despite the fact that we're online, despite the fact that we are shopping online, like all of these things. So anyway, so today we want to focus on the Main Street opportunity that is to build social connection. And as Bill alluded to, I want to think about Main Street in three different ways. So there's the physical place, the actual district, the buildings and the street and the sidewalks and the businesses themselves as locations. And anything kind of related. I know I see Susan on the call sheet. There's a park near her Main Street. So, that counts as part of that, right? That place. And then, but also the program. So, of course, Rhode Island is trying to implement this Main Street program. Um, and that would be our part would be the state level, but there's also all of these efforts in organizations at the local level. How did those organizations and the program bring people together, not only in what they do, but also in the doing it? So thinking about planning the festival brings people together, and then also just the people that attend the festival are coming together. So multiple opportunities there. And then also lastly, the idea of Main Street. So the identity that's associated with the place, the commercial district as the hub and the beating heart of the community, um, and what aspects of that can be better used to facilitate the connections in place. So I'm loving that I'm seeing things in the chat already. Please continue to add your questions in the chat. I also, if you haven't yet, please introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to actually ask Evelyn, can you go through and introduce yourself and the other people that we know are here?
Sounds good. So I'm Evelyn, and I'm the new Programs and Operations Associate with GrowSmart. And I'll go through, and if you guys want to like give a little wave or something, I'll go through this so we can get into our discussion. So we have Scott with GrowSmart, our amazing executive director. We have Susan here from South Kingstown EDC. We also have Lori Urso joining us, who's the senator for District 8 Pawtucket and president of the Slater Industrial Archive / Old Slater Mill Association, which is in Main Street in downtown Pawtucket. We also have Lisa here, who's the transportation engineer at Kimley Horn. We obviously have Bill, We have Isha with Rido. We have Toby, who's formerly with the Rhode Island for Community and Justice, now volunteering with Grossmart. We're very excited to have Toby as our volunteer. She's been working on a lot of really cool Main Street initiatives. And then we also have Caroline here with Grossmart, Jim from Richmond Town Council. We have Maureen, who's a Grossmart board member. We also have Bill, I think I saw, who's another amazing board member. Um, who are we missing here? We also have Lane, who's new at SWAP, which is Stop Wasting Abandoned Property, and Lane's also getting active in South Providence neighborhood. Um, and I think I also saw Valerie, who I believe is a transportation consultant, and Phyllis too, who I have not met but would love to learn more about. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if anyone hasn't. And I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts on this exciting topic.
Great. All right. So I thank you and welcome everybody. Here's what I'm thinking. And Beth just joined us, who I happen to know is from City of Cranston. So welcome, Beth, also. I'm going to pose a question. I'm going to have Bill respond first. And then if you want to comment on that question, go ahead and use the raise hand feature or wave at me in the video. And we can get the conversation going. So, and then Caroline and Evelyn, if you see something in the chat that's pertinent to the question or the topic, please go ahead and feel free to read the question from the chat. So first, thinking that our thoughts about Main Street, of course, because it is a physical location, we think about the physical aspects of it first. So, so wondering, assuming that we agree that the physical aspects of a walkable commercial district can either help facilitate social connection or not, depending on how it's designed. My question is, how could the physical aspects of a walkable commercial district better encourage social connection? So, Bill, why don't you start us off with your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really essential piece, right? I mean, there's the obvious stuff where sufficient and well-maintained sidewalks and crosswalks and infrastructure elements are really critical. You could add in bike lanes to that as well. And look, let's be honest about it. It's Rhode Island. We're going to be using cars, so sufficient parking as well. I think this creates just an ease with which people are more inclined to go out. But I also think that you think about your favorite walking trails, and for me, it'd be Carter Preserve in Charlestown. And there's this bench that's way out there. And when you get out to the bench, there's always people that have stopped to hang out and watch birds, or, oh, I think I heard a mountain lion or something like that, which is obviously not true because there's no mountain lions around. But you hear this kind of stuff and it sparks conversation. And what a beautiful day. Oh, how often do you come here? And all of a sudden you've made a new friend. So I think having spots where people can gather, they've done a really good job with this at the Providence pedestrian bridge, where there's numerous spots where people are playing chess or you kind of hang out and have food. So I think planning with almost like surprising little nooks for people to hang out at along Main Street where it's comfortable. And this can be private sector, outdoor dining, things like that, or public where it's physical spots. That all has to be holistic. Look, you've got a Department of Transportation in Rhode Island that doesn't understand this. They're killing bills left and right on transit and on sidewalks, multimodality. So it also requires pressure. Unfortunately, it ought not to, but it requires pressure from people to say, hey, we want this. This is more important to us than you might think. It's not just some kind of activist group that's pushing for this type of infrastructure. So I think it's a combination of advocacy and really understanding how valuable these types of spots are.
Yeah, I saw someone Lane posted pocket parks. So one of my questions was going to be, what sorts of public spaces in or near main streets should we prioritize when resources are limited? So I had parks and parklets on there. So I already name checked the park in South Kingstown. Are there other examples that people know about around Rhode Island or elsewhere where there's been a really successful implementation of a park or another public gathering spot in a main street that you noticed was really successful? Oh, Susan, go ahead.
Well, I have a slightly different take on this, which is I do live in South Kingstown, and right behind Main Street is the Saugatucket Park, which actually turns out to have been designed by the same landscape designer who designed Central Park in New York. And when this was discovered recently, we got a grant to redo the paths and to make a few other changes. We have not gone further and added benches and lights, which is something we need to do. We don't have any interpretive signage, which explains how important this park could be to Main Street. We've kind of taken the baby step. But here's what I want to say. Now, there's a school at the top of the park, the Wakefield Elementary School. It's been abandoned. It's used as a storage building for the school district and has been for 3 years. And the Economic Development Committee in Wakefield came up with a plan to do a minimum amount of not renovation, but just cleaning up of the building to replace broken windows that have been broken by kids who have seen it's empty, and so they throw a rock through a window. Minimum putting the toilets back on their drains, basic kinds of things. The building is not air conditioned. It's a 1960s one-story school, but it has 20 some classrooms, each of which has an exterior door. And so the Economic Development Department Committee came up with an idea that this would be an excellent place for a community hub. It's right behind Main Street. It's right beside this park. The bike path goes behind it. And we have a lot of people who live in this community because they want to be close to the beach, but they don't work in this community. They work in Colorado or California or something, but they need some community. And they are tired of sitting in a bar or a coffee shop to try and find that. So we came up with this proposal, which we put before the town council, to take the book building and use it as a community hub to allow artisans. I mean, the classrooms could be used with 4 desks in them, or they could be taken over by somebody who wanted to build dinghies or whatever people. The yoga people on Main Street are very keen to have extra space for their retreats. We had a lot of public interest in this, and then we ran into something. So this speaks both to Lane's issue of using an abandoned building, but here's what I want to raise as the problem. The town has also finally decided it needs to address its affordable housing shortage. And so the town school district owns this building, and if the town could take it over, they could build affordable housing there. So they don't like our plan. They want to tear down the school and build affordable housing. It's only 3.5 acres, and it doesn't allow for very much affordable housing. And there are other sites that work better, according to the Economic Development Committee. So anyway, we're in a fight now. We are fighting the people who want affordable housing. How can you say you don't want affordable housing? How can you say you aren't interested in the workforce? Then there's another group of people who have come along and said we should just tear the building down and expand the park. How can you say you aren't in favor of expanding the park? But our notion is that by getting lots of people working there, over a bridge to Main Street, adjacent to this park, would be a much more community revitalizing idea than the other ones. But my question to the group is, do you have any ideas for how I don't really have a question. I'm just telling you this as a story, but we are trying to figure out how we get people interested in our project. Thank you. I'm sorry I went on so long.
Oh, it's very interesting. You brought in a lot of components, a lot of stuff to talk about. Anyone have thoughts on that? I see Lane.
Sorry, there we go. I was mute for a second. So I was thinking about 2 things. first, I was thinking about Bristol, Rhode Island has done a great job, not on its main street, but on reclaiming its waterfront. So with every waterfront development, they, had easements put in for the public, and they created kind of a new main street all along the harbor, which was, I think, terrifically successful. And for all the waterfront communities who are doing, zoning changes and what have you, I think that that's a great option. And I think probably they're all doing it because it's fairly obvious. Bristol also has a whole bunch of school buildings on its town common. So again, not right on Main Street, but very close. And maybe just as sort of anecdotally, one of them was, I would say, like really colonized. And I almost mean that word literally, like people just kind of moved in, with, oh yeah, sure, you can take that room. Oh yeah, sure, you can take that room. And before you knew it, they were calling themselves the Byfield Arts Center or something like that. I can't remember. I think they're still in there. So in Bristol, when it happened organically, and the organic really worked, I would say. And then the town tried to get involved, and I think things began to sort of, to come apart a little bit. And then the organic sort of restated itself. And as far as I know, the organic is staying. Now, Bristol has a happy problem of having a surplus of these school buildings. So they have other, there are other buildings that they can try their various projects in. And then I was thinking about your 3.5 acre site or whatever you said it was. And the thing that I'm learning a lot about is density and getting people accustomed to the idea of density. We have a scarcity of buildings and lots and all of those things, and so that maybe we as a community need to think about density, which of course does enliven the main street, because if you have more people there are more people on the street. So those are the things that I'm thinking about in connection with what you've brought up.
I am curious about people's thoughts about the role of government in supporting businesses, either as vehicles for social connection or Main Street revitalization. Um, you know, I was so when I was thinking about this question before, I was thinking as to the extent that a business serves a social connection need or function, what is or should be the role of government in supporting or encouraging these types of businesses? Do people have thoughts about that, Bill? What's your first thought?
I think it goes back to that big question of like, well, what is government? What's the point? What is the point of having an organized society, and what role should it serve, and how should we be using tax dollars to better humanity? Right? I mean, that's one thing. But I also think it's interesting. I think of two quick examples. One in Providence, the some of the sculptures that have been displayed by the Avenue concept. The second one, the historic spring in Newport. Both of these are Main Street components. Both of them have served as architecture or physical spaces for people to reconnect. And in both cases, it was a lot of government dollars and planning and initiatives. But you know what else it was? It was private. It was rich people. And I was at an event where they were trying to light the sculptures in Kennedy Plaza that the Avenue concept had installed, and some city official said, "Oh, we don't have the funds for that or something." And I watched Yarrow Thorne, who at the time was the head of the Avenue concept, write a check for $25,000 out of his personal account and say, "Get them in." At the historic spring in Newport, which was a long-term project, it's now an amazing gathering spot. There's no anti-homeless architecture. It's just this, it's a beautiful place. Anybody can go hang out, have ice cream, spend the whole day, whatever. I was at a dinner last summer with a couple of people who had essentially paid for this and had said, one person wrote like a $200,000 check for this to happen. So I think that yes, government should be involved, but I also think that, we talk about taxing the rich and things like that. Well, what about just getting people to buy into this type of project? And for what it's worth, neither of those sites have any name placards, or they're not named for people. It's not the, it's not the Karchiri, spring or something like that. It's just kind of behind the scenes. You would never know. Working in tandem with people who believe in projects that have the means to fund them. I think that's a role that government can do as well. Find those people.
Yeah, what is it? What do other people think? I don't have um if anyone has not or maybe interested in watching we brought in a speaker a couple years ago, Ed McMahon, who was the former board chairman for Main Street America, and his work is focused on asset-based economic development, and he really makes the case about supporting the small, like lots and lots of small efforts. So I'm thinking about the organic artist group that Lane mentioned, or the idea that Susan has of the many small, um, maybe even individuals, like putting them together, clustered in a smaller area to achieve the density that in the activity that we're talking about. Um, and so Ed McMahon really makes a good argument for that, for um, government investment in the environment, like creating an atmosphere in which that can more easily occur, and that it's not just the economic activity from that small business or the many small businesses that may be in the art center, but creating the place where people want to be that Bill talked about at the beginning, and that talent these days is choosing their location first based on wanting to live in a fun, interesting, vibrant community, and then looking for the job. And the remote work is only making that worse, right? Or encouraging more of that. And that bigger companies now are looking, where should we locate? Where should we grow? We want to be where the people that we want to work for us want to live. So that investing in your place has all these ripple effects for economic development. So for that purpose seems that government would be interested in doing that. Does anyone here see that talk or know of Ed McMahon? Have anything to add? Agree, disagree? Lane?
Well, agree. And I didn't see the talk. I'm sorry, but I was just thinking about. I mean, so there's like I don't remember the exact framing of your question, but there's certainly policy stuff that government can do that makes it more palatable for businesses that will help, create a more vibrant Main Street. So whether, and we've all, again, I'm new to this, so it all seems like exciting and new to me, but parking regulations. Okay, maybe they don't have to have 12 spots for their business. Well, that makes more room for pedestrians and bikes and benches and pocket parks. And so all of that kind of stuff, I think they can have a really active role in. And I think many are, which is great, but more cheerleading probably the better, because as Bill said, we are pretty tied to our cars. And I feel like cars and earbuds in my world are the enemy to all Main Street interaction. So I don't think you can legislate against earbuds, but you can make cars more difficult.
Yeah.
I wonder if Jim was writing about a project they're moving forward with in Richmond. I don't know if Jim, if you can talk about that and the government involvement there, or what you're hoping to see there.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting being in town government and, thinking about some of the challenges and how slow it can move, coming from private industry in my day job and then working in government. One of the things that we've done in Richmond, just to come back to your question, is we put together a new task force that's been authorized by our town council to try to break down some of the silos. So we've brought together economic development, one person from that, one person from planning, one person from our recreation commission. We have a position for a community leader. We have a position for a local business owner, and then 2 members of council. And the reason we did that was there are a lot of great ideas that rely on these different boards or commissions. So if economic development says, we need to move forward on this redevelopment of this area, but they need input from planning, now we have someone who can carry the flag back from that task force to the board and help it move forward. So we're hoping to get more success there. I mean, in Richmond, it's a different situation. In rural Rhode Island, love the shout out for the park in Charlestown. It's a great, the Carter Preserve is fantastic. Our Main Street is 138, and there's not a lot of great walking areas along that. Some have curbs, some don't. The other challenge we have in Richmond is we're bifurcated by 95. So we have our Wyoming district on one side, and then we have the other side. And we'd like to make that more walking. All these ideas are great. Having small businesses, restaurants, shops where we can have people be attracted to and then walk around somewhere for them to walk to is exciting. We have a lot of infrastructure challenges. We do have a water line along 138, which can help to facilitate restaurants, but we don't have a sewer system. So when you think about bringing in restaurants, you have to take in consideration, we don't have the sewers. A lot of places off there are on wells. So and we're not going to be able to put that burden on the taxpayer to put a sewer system in, right? So we have to think about that. And the third challenge we have, and this is not unique to Richmond, and some of the other communities may suffer from this, but we don't have a lot of parcels that are large enough and zoned for, let's say, medium to large size businesses like a supermarket. We have one supermarket in town that's large, and we don't have a lot of food options. So if you've been to Richmond, you know you have a Stop and Shop. Well, just that's what it is, and it's the highest prices in the state and probably some of the lowest selection. The protective rental practices of that organization on other properties are inhibiting our ability to grow in our town. The one Charahoe Plaza that has the largest place for a competitive supermarket has a 99-year rental lease agreement by that corporation, and we've been stagnating, trying to fight that. And I know that, in fact, I believe it was Senator Blumenthal, when he was Attorney General in Connecticut, brought a case in Connecticut to try to fight that same issue. Unfortunately, lost. But this is a real problem that we're dealing with. We're trying to negotiate with the owners of the property, but for us to revitalize our main street, the first thing we need to do is remove that barrier. So that's one thing. Back to your question about this site, we're very excited to have that grant from HUD. It's a 5-acre property. We were a little bit worried when grants were on and off, but we confirmed we're moving forward, and we hope to have it come to fruition in the fall. Have canvassing and talking to residents. They want outdoor recreation space. We want to have that, but that's what we call the East End. If you look at our main street, it goes from where the town hall is all the way over, and the east side of Richmond, all the way over to the border of Hopkinton. So I hope I've answered Caroline, your question, but I just wanted to share some of those other challenges that we're dealing with in Richmond.
Wow. I'm so glad to have you today, because uh it's it's such an important voice to contribute to the conversation, because we think of like sometimes the rural communities, the different challenges don't get as represented in the conversation. So thank you so much for coming and
Thank you.
sharing. Yeah. So one last thing from Maureen about the physical environments. And then I do want to move us on to the other half, which is the programmatic people side of Main Street. But go ahead, Maureen.
I just have one comment. When we're
Yeah.
talking about these smaller projects, and we're talking between the connection between government, policy, and action, this is the role that we play, is it not?
Oh, as far as Grow Smart Rhode
Absolutely.
Island. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, that's our challenge and that's our mission. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Good shout out. Okay, so so in addition to the physical environment, in order to get some of these changes made in the physical environment and the policy, bringing in the grants and then executing on them requires people, right? And so that is where a Main Street organization could come in, or an organization that is embracing the 4 points approach, right? You don't have to form a new organization. If you have an organization or committee or task force in your community that can serve as, acting as a Main Street program would, by embracing all 4 points and making the connections that someone was talking about. I think, Jim, you were saying about bringing back, connecting the dots to the different players. So, so one challenge I run into when talking about the people side of Main Street is that sometimes that piece of it is either seen as that it will happen naturally, right? Because this is Rhode Island, we all know each other. Sometimes it's seen as not less important. So like fluff is right, like a term that we've used or heard, that or maybe the Main Street people, the people that are interested in community, are they're the party people. Like they put on the good festival, but they're not serious about revitalization or whatever. So what I'm curious to know, and Bill, we'll start with you, is do we think it's actually less important? Or like, is the physical environment and the businesses that those parts of it, is it really more important? Like, should we be really starting there? Or is the community people side of it just as important, perhaps maybe more important? How do we better explain that? So I'm going to start with you, Bill.
I think one thing, if we're looking at this on a Rhode Island level, is to remember the nuance of the state. And to Jim's point about um, Richmond, for example, the situation there with sewage challenges, so on and so forth, it creates a different version of Main Street. So I think of Richmond, I think of 138, I think of Elena's coffee shop, and there's kind of a cluster of businesses right before you get to the preserve that by default have become a spot where people are gathering, maybe not in huge numbers, but by default, that is kind of the spot where, other than Meadowbrook Golf Course, where people are going to be meeting up to get a burrito or just be out and about. And identifying it's going to look different in Richmond than it's going to look in Newport, than it's going to look in Burrillville, than it's going to look in Woonsocket. So I think it's critical for policymakers to understand the habits that are already there of a community. What are they drawn to? What seems to be working? What doesn't work? And then from that standpoint, you can understand, well, this particular community, for example, Richmond, is really relying on the private sector. Chris Caswell, Ryan Moran, the owners of that Elena's Ale House down there, or Elena's, they also own the Ale House, but the cafe, they're starting that conversation. It's them putting in a business that maybe raises the conversation on sewage, whereas in Warren, it may be more of a policy oriented top down approach, because it's kind of clear where people are already gathering. So I really think nuance is the key, especially in Rhode Island, and also from the standpoint of parochialism, which is often viewed as a negative. We could turn that into a positive and say, hey, wait a minute, this works well in Westerly, this works well in Charlestown, this works well in South Kingstown, and kind of get that combination effect. And I think it's both observing where people are and observing why they're drawn to where they are.
Yeah, what do other people think about the focus on the people versus the physical place? Show of hands, like, does anyone feel like we have to figure out the place first? Like, um, just is it or
Is your question, I mean, so I think some people are talking about like all the people who've moved to Rhode Island, as part of the pandemic exodus from cities. So we have a lot more people here. But
yeah.
is your question, will the people get to know each other on their own and have the power to create the main street? Is that, or like, because I think that's the problem, as someone said, like, it's the people that are one step removed. It's not your best friends, it's your neighbors who you might not know.
Hmm.
And how do you get them to know each other to then be a force to create a main street and community atmosphere? Is that sort of the problem that you're getting at?
So I guess the question I'm getting at is that so the gap I feel like we're trying to fill is that in Rhode Island we've made a lot of investments in our, I mean, relatively speaking, in our physical environment. We have the Streetscape Improvement Fund, right, where we're doing, where you can apply for money for benches, and you can do facade improvement, and you can plant trees, and like fix sidewalks, like that sort of stuff. I feel like everyone's already aware that we need to do that, and they are, as possible, trying to create programs and resources for communities to do that. And also, there's been, a lot of attention paid to small business and providing services for small businesses who can write business plans or grow our entrepreneurship ecosystem. But the people part, which I'm thinking about not only as a Main Street organization, but also as the 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 idea of social connection as being a worthwhile um, intangible thing to invest in. That it's, you know, I'm arguing that it's just as, if not more important, to be present in our thinking as we make these decisions about resource allocation. And I guess I'm trying to get a sense from the room if you agree with me or or not, which is
Like,
fine.
like investing in gatherings rather than investing in places to gather. Is that kind of the
And of course it's not an either or, But
No, but as opposed to, look, we've been made a lot of investments in the places where we gather. So now
mhm.
we need to do something to make people gather there. Whether it, I mean, is that kind of what you're saying?
That's my question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
Jim.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think it helps as an elected official. For example, we had very successful holiday tree lighting event. And again, in Richmond, we're not doing concerts in the park yet. We're doing food trucks and tree lightings, right? But that's a step in the right direction. And those demonstrated to us such an outpouring of support from the community. It allowed us to increase the funding for the
Mm,
recreation commissions in the next year's budget by 200% without
wow.
opposition. So it's because we had those and we had positive feedback, it really enabled us to go to the next step, and that's going to be incremental. We're also reformatting our in this budget that hopefully will be approved. Our health and wellness director for our community. We're moving into a community oversight person where they'll manage recreation as well as senior activities to bring a broader scope, to bring in more activities and things for our community. So we see it as incremental, but the more success we have, the more it sets us up to invest in that, whether it be just financially or in infrastructure in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Um,
Can I,
Gertrude, did you have your hand up?
yeah, I wanted to ask a question. So, I'm from Barterville, um, and one of the challenges, and I wondered, and I apologize, I was late, I had another meeting, as if it's the purview and for this particular group, looking at, you mentioned the startups, and I do think, based on my experience, because I've been engaged a lot in a lot of the economic issues, challenges, and things as an owner of a small business. One of the challenges is the economic value and that a particular community offers. And even though we're very small and very nuanced, we do have some particular features. Um, and I think the challenge seems to be, at this point in time, based on the meetings I've been to, there's a lot of investment in startup from Providence East.
Mm,
And then very often what happens is, that west side of the state often gets very underserved, not because I don't think there's anybody that cares, but so I guess my question is that, because to me, that's part of the economic development. You can do a lot of activities, you can do a lot of those things, but if you don't provide, as you know, you may know, we've just had some huge challenges with the homeless shelter and some other things, some social issues that are going on. There's got to be, I really feel like the pocketbook issues are where a small community has to focus, and how do you capitalize on what, let's, for example, Jim, I was really interested in what you were saying about Richmond, that, we're obviously very rural and very different. And how, is this interest in this group?
Bill, did you want to respond?
I think it's a really important thing you note, and I think it speaks to a bifurcated state for sure. That having grown up in Western rural Rhode Island, it's a different experience, no question about it. When you start to move eastward, I think we've seen great examples of investments in Chepachet and in a few other spots, as highlighted at the Smart Growth Awards. But I wonder if there's an assumption of folks by design. If you choose to live in a rural community, you're living absent a main street, and that just creates a level of disinterest or lack of importance. And I remember growing up in Western Rhode Island, people would sometimes be like, "We're going to go into town. Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "Into town? You're going into Wakefield 10 minutes down the road. It's not that, this isn't the Oregon Trail moving, people in mass." But there is, I found, a mentality of, hey, we're out in the woods. Once in a while, we'll leave. But uh, again, super anecdotal. So it's more about convincing people, hey, you know what? We need these gatherings, spots, or events. And if you're and on the pocketbook side, hey, you're taking your money to South Kingstown, or you're taking your money to Woonsocket, that could stay in Burrillville, or heaven forbid you go to Blackstone, Massachusetts. Keep that money keep your dollars local. And that might encourage people to think, well, how do we do that?
Like, I guess it's to me, it's a little bit more than that. So, for example, one of the things, and that the politics of what's going on with the artificial turf and all of that other. But one of the things that I keep hearing that the messaging from a lot of people is maintaining that rural nature. And there's something about that rural nature. How do we help capitalize on that rural nature? What's the features that rather than competing with Blackstone or competing with another part of the state, rather than helping to focus on what we have to offer, bringing or companies to that. So, for example, I've been engaged a lot in the whole blue tech movement. Um, and I was having this conversation with somebody from Newport, and I said, Ocean Tech, Ocean Tech. We do have a lot of water up in Burrillville,
That's right.
so the focus should not necessarily be on just one part of the state. I mean, wastewater, all of the things that have been going on with the artificial turf, the education, all those things. So the social aspect is really important because it builds community, but to keep people there in that community, how do you become more of an economic engine for that to happen?
Mm.
And Gertrude, I'm going to send you to Main Street America to check out their website because there's
Okay.
thousands of communities that that have been doing like exploring the idea of capitalizing on your unique identity for economic and social reasons. And one of the reasons we want to connect with Main Street America as a state is so that we can learn from what all these other communities have been doing for over 40 years. So I see we are almost at time. And so Bill, I'm going to leave you with the last word. I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer this question about how, maybe it speaks what Gertrude was saying, how does the idea of Main Street and the identity of place, like how can we leverage that for social connection through Main Street?
Mm. Wow, it's such a profound question. So the simplified version of it is when people are around each other and they get to know each other, they become less suspicious of each other. They form traditions, they form family, they form value, they fall in love, they go through heartbreak, they go through those traditions that are those experiences that um, sculpt the human condition. And I'd almost say that taking the when we start sculpting Main Street and we start sculpting the urban and rural environments we live in, taking an artist's view, the artist's lens to this more than anything else is the most important. Purely optimistic, using imagination and thinking big without worrying about the economic or political barriers. Think big and then get as close to that as we can. And if we're able to do that on a pocket by pocket basis, and people are able to experience it in a way that's meaningful to them, what Rhode Island is going to become is a model for other, whether you want to call them cities, states, clusters, states, regions, of what's possible. And we need to think about what's possible and then realize, okay, well, we can't do that. The governor puts forth the 2030 plan. This is a 2130 plan that really we should be focused on. We should be able to reap the benefits in our lifetimes in the next 5-10 years of this, but we have to think real big if we're going to get to where we want to get to for our grandchildren.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you everyone for coming. I will point out that our next roundtable will be held on June 26th. That right? Yep, June 26th at noon. We're actually going to be talking about Main Street as social infrastructure as climate resilience. So we're going to be welcoming Katie Trouts from Montpelier Alive, Montpelier, Vermont. You may talking about water and flooding that the Montpelier experienced and how she is the director of their Main Street group downtown Montpelier was really the leaders of the response and then the recovery in their downtown. So fascinating story. She's amazing and would love to have you all meet her and chat with her on June 26th. So So yeah, thanks for being here. Thank you so much to Bill for being here. Thank you again to our sponsors, and we'll stick around if anyone wants to keep chatting. But if not, we will see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
I would love to have some emails from people. And I'm wondering, Jill, is it possible? I just had this conversation with a group of people last night about it, and somebody said to me, "Oh, this is above my pay grade," but I think getting them to understand exactly was. I'm so sorry I was late, but this is an important part of the conversation. How do I get more involved so I can start to educate the people that I'm around?
Yeah. Are you subscribed to our Main Street RI newsletter?
I must have because that's how I found